Hello, everybody. Yes, the mic is on. Okay, so let's go ahead and get this started. We're going to do a couple of quick introductions, and we have to do, I assume. So first of all, welcome everybody to this public comment interested parties meeting for water rate structures. So if you were here for the party, that's a different room. This is the water rates. So just do some quick introductions. I'm Scott Fines. I'm the chair of the Water and Light Advisory Board. I'm going to go quickly down the thing and let each people introduce themselves here at the dais, just really fast.
Jay Hasheider, Water and Light Board.
Robin Winokur, a board member as well.
I'm Ryan Williams. I'm the Assistant Utilities Director for Water and Electric.
Sarah Talbert, Assistant Director of City Utilities Rates.
Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thomas Beckley, Raftalis Financial Consultants.
And then way up over here.
And I'm Tad Johnson. I'm the Director of Utilities.
Okay. Tad's going to try and be very quiet all night and pretend that you're not here, I guess. Okay, so I just want to talk very briefly about what we're hoping to accomplish tonight, what we're here for. We see here, it's a little bit of an agenda. I want to first talk a little bit about why we're here. There kind of are two things in my mind that sort of inspired why we want to get public comment. The first one is that every few years, the utility likes to perform something called a cost of service study. It's essentially, we want to determine that anybody who's connected to, in this case, our water system, is paying their sort of fair share. In this case, fair usually means that each group of customers is covering its own expenses. So if it costs $1 million a year to deliver water to everybody in the residential world, then the residential world should generate about $1 million of revenue. We like to do that every few years because that sort of gets in and out of sync. And so the utility has done that, and it's kind of that time again to do that. Another motivating factor is the recently passed water bond, which I'm sure many of you have known about. Part of the water bond is going to be a need to increase revenue over the next few years. And so the question becomes, from where do we get that revenue? We have to do things, and things require money, and so things have to be paid for. So here we are. The utility recently commissioned a cost of service study from Raftalis Financial Consultant, of which Tom is our representative tonight. And they have produced a report and two proposed rate structure changes, which are designed to sort of move our rates towards that cost of service model. The purpose of this meeting then is to get your input, the public's input, on those two proposed structures. We, the Water and Light Advisory Board, along with the staff and our helpful consultant, will try and take all of your comments and develop a recommendation for the upcoming rate structures. So first tonight, we will have a presentation by Tom. He's going to go relatively briefly over the two rate structures and their motivations and how they're put together and why we do them, and also kind of explain how they work. Then we're going to actually allow a little bit of a break for people to sort of think about it and percolate it and sort of talk and think about how those structures work. And then we're going to open up for public comment. We're going to, I ask in the interest of being respectful to your fellow citizens that we maintain our comments at about 5 minutes each. We have a little timer up here to help you sort of remember that, and also to sort of be polite to your fellow citizens. I mean, you can yell at me all you want, that's fine, but try not to yell at your fellow citizens, I hope. We will kind of keep a timer to help remind you of that. Also tonight, we have a couple of documents as you came in. I sort of hope you saw. One is sort of this sheet here, and then there are some other charts as well. These are designed to sort of help you make sense of the rate changes with respect to your own water bill. So you can fill in sort of your columns for usage and determine how the individual proposed rate structures might actually affect you specifically. And to help you figure out some of those pieces, we have some customer service representatives who graciously agreed to spend some time out in the lobby tonight, who you can talk to about getting information about your bill and other, well, actually, pretty much any customer service action that you need tonight. So please feel free to go out and talk to them about sort of figuring out how it affects you specifically and exactly. And after the meeting is over, we ask that you sort of complete a survey and let us know what your thoughts are. We are currently recording this, which is going to be great when my son sees this. And we're going to put up this and several other pieces of information up on the city's website, so you can come back and reference it. And over the next 2 weeks or so after this meeting, we'll be collecting public comment. So even if you or friends didn't manage to make it tonight, they can still watch this and sort of make sense of it and give us your comments and feedback. And then over the next month or so after that, the staff and the board will develop a recommendation which will be delivered to City Council about the rate structures, and then ultimately City Council will be making a decision on that. So with that, so there's the survey, by the way. So with that, I will actually turn this over to Tom to begin discussion of the two different rate structures. So take it away, Tom.
Thank you. This presentation is something we presented to City Council several months ago with the addition of the second option for the rate structure. So if any of you were at that meeting, a lot of this should look familiar, but we have added the second rate option, which is the individualized block option that we'll talk about second. So to give you a little background on what we're trying to accomplish, I'll talk in a minute about the overall financial plans for the utility, the water utility. And basically, over the next several years, to pay for both increases in operating and maintenance expense, which is, inflation, just like you and I face, increases in electricity, increases in labor costs, increases in insurance. The utility faces the same inflationary pressures. And so there's increases in O&M costs. In addition, we have the recently approved bonds that were voted on in August, and those have some added costs on them. And that's to pay for capital improvements for the system that will benefit the utility and the entire city in the long term, and so they've decided to finance those. And it's a great benefit for utilities to finance improvements like that because it creates what's called intergenerational equity, because there's people who do not live in the city right now but will live in the city in 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years, and they will receive the benefit of those improvements. And by financing them over the years, over the next 20 years, they actually then pay for a portion of the benefit that they're going to receive. Since we didn't pay for it all right now, by pushing it out with financing, it actually allows us to recover the cost from those customers who aren't here yet. And so there is a benefit to financing for these types of long-lived capital improvements at the plant like the bonds will pay for. So the first consideration when we began the study that we looked at was looking at pricing objectives. And these pricing objectives help guide us in saying, for the rates, do we want to make changes to the existing rate structure? And so there's an example on the screen of some pricing objectives that we looked at: affordability, cost to service-based allocations, ease of implementation, economic development, and other considerations like that. Rate stability, revenue stability, these are all important factors for the utility. However, it's important to recognize that we can't do things that basically accomplish all of these things at the same time. We have to make trade-offs when we make changes to the rate structures. And so by going through this pricing objectives exercise, it helped us understand what's important to the City of Columbia. And in doing that, we worked with two different bodies. We worked with the Water and Light Advisory Board, which is sitting in front of you today, and we worked with City Council, and we polled them and we worked with them to develop what we understood to be the pricing objectives for the City of Columbia. What's most important? And so you can see here that the top ones, there's some difference in the exact rankings, but it's actually pretty similar. Cost service-based allocations was most important to both groups. Affordability was in the top 3 for both groups. Conservation and demand management was in the top 4 for both groups. Rate stability was important, for both groups in the top 5. And so those are the things that we looked at, are there changes to the rate structure we can make to help address these? So before we looked at changes to the rate structure, we first developed an overall financial plan for the utility. And this bar chart basically shows you what the bars themselves represent. What are the financial requirements for the water utility for 2018 for the next 5 years through 2023? And the blue line represents, well, how much revenue would the utility generate if we kept rates the same as they are today? And what you can see is by 2023, the utility would be running at a significant deficit. So some rate increases are necessary to support the long-term health of the utility. And the green bar represents the rate increases that are being proposed to fully fund the utility, including not just O&M and debt service, but also payments to the city, as well as some rate-funded capital improvements. And you can see the gray part of that, the rate-funded capital improvements, is not very large, but there are some there. One of the important considerations in developing the overall financial plan for the utility is what's called debt service coverage. And what this means is basically for us to issue the bonds that were approved by the vote in 2017 is we have to basically promise the bondholders that we'll pay our O&M costs. The bondholders want to make sure that we're maintaining the utility because basically we've pledged the utility is how we're going to pay back those bonds. And so we promise the bondholders that we'll set rates to cover O&M plus how much debt service we have, including how much we owe them as well as other debt we've issued in the past, and then have a margin on top of that. And so you'll see over the course of the next 5 years, we're projecting that debt service coverage for the water utility will be 1.26 in 2019, drop a little bit in 2022, and by 2023 be 1.3. So we're generating a little bit of margin above just O&M and debt service. And that margin, that doesn't go anywhere. That's not profit. That's used to invest in the utility. That's where that rate-funded capital improvements comes from. Because there are certain capital improvements. Remember how I said debt service is good for long-lived assets? We have other assets that's just fixing other improvements, fixing older assets, making other more minor investments. We'd rather cash finance those. We don't want to be borrowing for everything we need to do. That doesn't make financial sense in the long term. And so that's what that money above debt service and O&M goes to that we've promised our bondholders that we'll generate. So the first scenario I want to talk about, basically we've developed two potential rate scenarios based on those pricing objectives we talked about and the existing rate structure, considering we didn't want to just ignore what our existing rate structure is, but are there changes to the existing rate structure we can make to better address those pricing objectives we identified, working with this board as well as City Council. So the first one we looked at was what we have labeled as fixed block rate scenario, and I'll explain that a little more here. First, I want to talk a little bit about our existing rate structure, just to kind of make sure everybody's familiar with what we have right now. The fixed charge schedule, basically this is the fixed charge that the water utility customer pays per month just to have service from the utility. Whether or not, even if you use 0 gallons in a month, you still have this fixed charge, and it starts at $9.75 for the smallest meters, which are typical for a residential property as well as small commercial properties. And then it ranges up to $1,200 for our largest customers that have 8-inch meters. And you'll see, and actually for 2019, under the current scenario, we're not proposing any increase to this fixed charge. And so for all our customers, we're not proposing that we recover any of the additional revenue necessary through this fixed charge. For our volume rates, right now the existing rate structure is what's shown, and I know this slide is a little busy, but I'll try to do my best to explain it. This slide shows both our existing rates as well as what we're proposing. Basically, our existing rate structure is what's labeled as Tier 1 and Tier 2 on this slide. For the 8 months that aren't summer months, and summer months for purposes of discussion tonight are the bills you receive in June, July, August, and September. That's what we call our summer period, our seasonal period. For all the other 8 months that you receive bills besides those 4 months, all of your usage is in Tier 1. And so currently it's $2.79 per CCF for residential customers, and you'll see that other customers have different rates for that usage right now. For during the summer months, once you exceed 2 CCF right now, you start paying Tier 2 rate, which currently is $3.91 per CCF. For commercial, large commercial, and what we call our master meter customers, and for those, master meter is a term that applies to residential properties with 4 or more units. It's basically apartment buildings and things like that because they're more similar to commercial than residential. The way theirs works right now is above 70% of their average winter consumption, they go into a Tier 2. And so that's the same Tier 2 rate right now is residential pays. So what we're proposing is the addition of a Tier 3. And the addition of the Tier 3 the main driver behind this is discussing with the Water and Light Advisory Board as well as City Council, and I mentioned this, conservation and demand management was an important factor here for the city. And it's just a general ethos of conservation. People want to use these resources wisely. And also, we're faced with the prospect of having to develop additional demand in the midterm, somewhere out in the 5 to 10 year range. Right now, it's projected if our demand keeps increasing, we're going to have to make a significant investment in new treatment capacity. And so hopefully if we can effectively implement conservation and demand management, that might avoid that capital improvement at least for several years, saving all the customers that investment. And so what was proposed is that for Tier 3 and for residential customers, that would be above 8 CCF. And when we talk about fixed blocks, that's what we mean. For residential customers, the blocks would be 2 CCF, just like it currently is under the existing rate structure. And then the third tier cutoff would be 8 CCF. And so that's what we mean by fixed. It's the same for all customers. It's fixed for all residential customers. For commercial, right now, they're cut off from Tier 1 to Tier 2, 70% of their average winter consumption, and we proposed it to be similar to what we were proposing for residential, that for usage above 170% of average winter consumption, that would be their Tier 3 usage. So they would have a Tier 3 as well if they have high demand during our summer months. And again, to repeat myself, this Tier 3 only applies for bills issued in June, July, August, and September. It is not year-round. And so that applies to the other customer classes. And then irrigation for tier, basically all irrigation usage during the summer period would pay Tier 3 rate. So what impact does this have on a typical customer bill? Now, one of the advantages to implementing the structure in the first year is that by implementing this Tier 3, we're actually able to hold Tier 1 and Tier 2 rates the same as they currently are. So for customers who do not go out of Tier 2, for customers who use less than 8 CCF in the summer, they would not see a change in their bill in 2019. Their bills for 2019 would be the same as 2018. Basically, all of the additional revenue needed to help pay for the bonds and pay for additional O&M costs would be recovered from the Tier 3 usage. Now, so for customers using 10 CCF, so this would be a residential customer who might have a little bit of outdoor usage in the summer. And I guess I should step back. For those of you who don't know, CCF stands for 100 cubic feet, and it's how we bill water. It's a common. There's two common units of measurement for water billing in the United States, CCF and gallons. Gallons obviously makes a lot of sense to all of us. We all know what a gallon of milk looks like at the grocery store. CCF stands for 100 cubic feet. It's very commonly used, but certainly confusing to a lot of people. 1 CCF is 748 gallons. I always just try to remember 750, honestly, just to keep it easy. So 10 CCF is 7,480 gallons a month of usage. So that's a pretty, good usage. That would likely include some outdoor usage, not a ton. That wouldn't be watering a huge lawn every day, but it would include watering a small garden or keeping your flowers in front of your house watered every day or something along those lines. And so those customers will see a bit more of an increase in 2019 because they get into that Tier 3. Basically, they would have 2 CCF of usage out of their 10 in that Tier 3, so that would be a bigger increase on that. So you can see, for example, comparing these two in the 2019 change, and we've shown 2020 through 2023 here, but that would still be to be approved in the future. All the City Council would be looking to do in the near term is implement 2019 rates. So for somebody who stays at 5 CCF, and again, this applies to anybody who stays 8 CCF and under, they would see no change in their bill for 2019. Whereas once you start to move above that 8 CCF mark, that's when you would see an increase in your bill due to going into that Tier 3. So if you use 2 CCF, you would see a 17% increase in that summer bill. And again, this is only summer bills. So how does this compare to other communities? We've prepared a comparison here to some similar communities in the region. And you can see right now our 2018 rates are towards lower end, 2706, very similar to Lawrence, Kansas. Springfield, Illinois has very reasonable water rates, but theirs will likely have to increase in the near future. But compared to Springfield, Joplin, Kansas City, especially a larger city, Kansas City, Kansas, and Missouri both have much higher rates for bigger cities. You can see, this wouldn't have a large impact on, and again, for those customers using 5 CCF, as shown in this chart, there's no change. And even in 2020, what we project for 2020, they would still be below most of the other communities in this survey. So next I want to talk about individualized block rates, and this is the newer addition to our presentation. Like I said, we presented what I showed you already to City Council several months ago, and based on feedback we received from the Water Light Advisory Board, City Council, and other members of the community, they want us to take a closer look at basically what we do for commercial customers, which is set blocks based on how much each customer actually uses. And the benefit to this really is we do have some, instead of having blocks at 2 and 8 CCF, and again, 2 CCF is the current block cutoff for that usage, and 8 would be where we would set it at to go into Tier 3, really looking at what does each customer individually use. And the benefit to this is we do have some customers who may have larger households or just have older plumbing, older appliances, older fixtures that use more water. And so it recognizes how much each customer actually uses in the winter in setting that tier cutoff for their summer usage. And so we've developed this chart to hopefully demonstrate this. And I understand this isn't necessarily the simplest concept to understand, but basically right now, the average winter consumption for water is set in the period of January, February, March. And again, we do this for commercial already, but not residential. So for this example, customer used 6 CCF in January, 4 CCF in February, and 5 CCF in March. And so their average winter consumption is 5 CCF. The average of those 3 bills together is 5 CCF. So come the summer period of June, July, August, and September, bills issued in those months, we take their average winter consumption that we determined a few months before, 5. In the Tier 1 cutoff at 70% then would be 3.5 CCF. In the Tier 2 cutoff would be 8.5 CCF. And so, for example, this customer in the month of June, they didn't start doing any heavy watering yet, and they were still at 3 CCF in the month of June, so all their usage was in Tier 1. In the next month of July, when they used 8 CCF, they started to move into that Tier 2, so they used their entire Tier 1 allocation of 3.5, and then 4.5 CCF, their usage was in Tier 2. And one thing I want to point out here is you always get your Tier 1 rate for your Tier 1 water, and you always get your Tier 2 rate for your Tier 2 water. So even our highest users will still get their first 70% of their average winter consumption at the Tier 1 rate. When you go to Tier 3, that doesn't mean that you're paying the Tier 3 rate for all of your usage. Someone asked that question to me earlier today, and I want to make that clear, that you always get your Tier 1 and your Tier 2 rate for whatever usage you have there. You don't move to, if you get into Tier 3, that doesn't mean all your usage gets billed at Tier 3. And so the August, they have their highest usage of 10. So they get 3.5 in Tier 1. They get they use the full 5 that they have in Tier 2, and then 1.5 CCF of their usage is billed at Tier 3. So this is kind of a breakdown of how these average winter consumptions would impact this example customer. And as Scott mentioned, there's customer service representatives out here that have your billing data, and there's worksheets so that you can figure this out for your own bills based on your actual usage for the past 12 months. You can all do this individually and take a look at how this actually impacts you. We have this example here to try to demonstrate how it impacts just an example customer, but we certainly recognize everybody's usage is different. So when we looked at the data, just to give you some perspective on how the overall customers here in Columbia look, for residential customers, our average AWC, which is average winter consumption, is 5.48 CCF. And so the average Tier 1 cutoff is 3.83 CCF, and you can see this is a fair bit higher than the 2 CCF that's currently used. And again, that 2 CCF and 70% for commercial is the existing rate structure. That's not something we're proposing. That's what's currently done. And then the average Tier 2 cutoff would be 9.3 CCF. And we've shown you commercial and large commercial here, as well as master meter for comparison. Those customers obviously use more and more. And the City of Columbia is very proactive in making sure large commercial is truly large. If they don't use enough water to be recognized as large commercial, they actually get moved down to commercial automatically. So that is something that's done more proactively than other communities I've worked with in the past. So the overall volumetric rate structure that we're proposing is actually the same as what we're proposing. The rates themselves are the same as what we were proposing under the fixed. It's just how we determine the tiers for residential that has changed. That we're proposing that instead of using the 2 and the 8, we use the 70 and the 170% of average winter consumption to determine where each residential customer. And one other thing I should point out is, for those of you who may not be here in the winter, average winter consumption, there's a minimum for purposes of determining water bills that would be set, and what we've proposed, and typically there's a minimum. So if you go away during the entire winter and you use 0 CCF all winter, your average winter consumption is going to be 0. Or even if you're just here like 1 week out of the month, you go to Florida the other 3 weeks, it's not going to be 1. It's going to be a minimum of 4 is what we're proposing. So the minimum average winter consumption for any customer, and this even includes smaller households. You know, if you have a single retired person, they may only use 1 or 2 CCF a month. But when it comes summer, your minimum average winter consumption for purposes of this rate structure would be 4 CCF is what we're proposing. So how does this impact our customers? So based on this change, for a customer, some customers may actually see a decrease in their bill because what they'll have is more of their usage will be in Tier 1 than it currently is. By having Tier 1 fixed at 2 CCF, we're actually raising that for a lot of the customers. They'll get more Tier 1 water. So you see, for the example, the 5 CCF usage here, they actually have more Tier 1 and less Tier 2 usage, and so their bill will actually go down in 2019. And then even for the 10 CCF customer, their bill will actually go up less than the fixed scenario. Now, for other customers, they'll see a larger increase in their bills offsetting. You know, for customers who use a lot more in the summer, they may see larger increases in their bills. Again, this is a similar comparison to what we looked at before. So for Columbia 2019, you can see that the bill is actually, we would actually be below Lawrence with the proposed rates, whereas before we were slightly above them, and that's the difference. And when I talk about that, customers getting more Tier 1 usage than they currently get with the tier being set at 2 CCF. So that's the end of my prepared presentation, and I'll be here all night to collect your feedback as we work forward with the Water and Light Advisory Board staff and the council on developing further recommendations.
Thank you, Tom. So I think at this point it's nice. There's a lot of math and numbers and random things. So it's nice to take a short little break here where we can sort of talk loudly and figure out how this works. I remind you that we do have customer service reps out in the lobby who can help you figure out your actual bill values. And I think we're going to go ahead and pick back up with the sort of public comment period in about, I'm going to say 15 minutes. So let's say 6:45. We'll start with the public comments. So thank you.
Hi. Sure.
I'm absolutely not certain that if I was sitting out in the audience.
That's all right.
I wrote down.
All I did is talk from
Reduce that and also talk slower and just make it more simple.
Somebody asked me this question earlier, and
I think I see
it's
that.
all people. There's some people have irrigation only meters. All irrigation only meters are charged. They're on an irrigation meter, yes.
Is it okay to get up? I was going to
I
go.
was hoping that we would get up and walk around.
Yeah, I was going to see if people need help to go.
I think we've all had an opportunity. It seemed like there was a lot of vigorous discussion, which is always a good thing. I think at this point, I think we'd like to open up the floor a little bit. I'd like to for public comment. I'd like to remind a few things of the basic idea. We're going to open up for about 5 minutes each. So please be polite to your fellow citizens. Okay. Right ahead.
Hi, Scott. My name is Jim Windsor. I live at 200 Manor Drive, if you need that information. Until March of this year, I was Assistant Director of Utilities, and for 32 years of my 36-year career, I did cost of service studies, rate design for the utilities. I will not be impacted by either of these proposals because I have lower water usage than what would impact that. However, I still am concerned about the utilities revenue stream, and I think that both of these proposals are misguided. They put everything in the summer with nothing to ensure that you will get the revenue stream that you need. Technology is changing on a per capita basis. Water usage is going down just because of the change out that occurs with the facilities in homes. By looking only at summer, you are betting that weather will be such that you will have high water usage and that people will not react to the financial message that's being sent to them. Both of those put pressure and they put the revenue requirement at risk. It also will have a rate shock for a lot of people that do not pay attention, that are not here tonight, that will not know it until they get their bills next July and see that they suddenly have a large increase in their cost. Commercial customers, which are not represented typically, many of them, because of the requirements by the city for green space, have put in separate irrigation meters. Their bills will double. You've already said that. They will pay all of their cost at the higher level for those irrigation meters. And quite frankly, I have no problem with charging people for spraying water on the ground. However, I think you need to ease into it. You need to educate people, and you need to make other people, including myself, pay for this, because those bond issues, a large component of that is to redo the water plant. And I've been in my house for over 30 years. I have certainly used that water plant, but under this proposal, I will pay nothing. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jim.
Hi, my name is Peter Norgard, 1602 Hinkson Avenue. I don't have any comments. I actually have two questions. Question number one is probably for the consultant. You mentioned the winter quarter average plan uses a 4 CCF threshold, base threshold, used for the calculation for the summer months. And I'm curious if the fixed charge plan also uses 4.
I believe it's 2, right?
Basically, we're not proposing a change. The 2 is the current number, and we're not proposing that be changed.
Okay, and the other question I have is it seems to me the interest is in conservation and pushing people to conserve. And one of the ways to do that is to punish them through higher fees. Another way is to incentivize through planned incentivization, and one of those could be, and you might consider, suggesting that some of these larger water users hook up with somebody in the city who is familiar with sustainable type watering techniques to improve their efficiencies. And I think that's all I have to say.
Yep. All right, well, thank you.
Hello, Julie Ryan, 5301 Regal Way, representing Como Safe Water Coalition. So I have a few different comments that I wanted to talk about. And one thing I wanted to do is quote, there's a University of North Carolina Sierra Club report from February of 2014, designing water rate structures for conservation and revenue stability. And some of the items I wanted to bring up from that: utilities expecting the majority of their revenues from variable charges will struggle to recover costs. Higher rate increases tend to yield disproportionately lower revenue increases. Higher percentage of residential water bills that are fixed, the weaker the conservation signal and stronger the revenue stability. So just some pieces that I kind of wanted to bring up from that. Another thing is, in terms of those, irrigation not being metered is something that I think we are being short-sighted about. We've talked about that as Como Safe Water Coalition for a number of years now, and not being able to effectively meter that, whether it's for new residential construction or commercial industrial, I think is something that we're missing, and especially in terms of the balance of conservation and revenue stability. Going to, when I was reviewing the addendum to the cost of service report and the individual block rates, that does show increases in those fixed base charges. Would that still be considered what we would be adopting?
Are you referring to the 2020 and going out?
Yeah, and on, yeah. I know the 975 base charge was like 2018, 2019, but after that, that fixed charge was increasing.
I think that's what's in the report, but I mean, we're taking it 1 year at a time, right? So
well, and I think that's part of our problem here is that we're kind of taking things 1 year at a time. Nothing against you, but I feel that that's part of our problem is because we had a number of years here where, again, that study goes back to talking about when you have incremental small rates that people can digest on a yearly basis. It protects the revenue, and it also gives people manageable ways to handle that. We went through 4 years where we had no operational rate increases. And while that may look pretty on surface, what did that do to us? Right? We've talked about this. As Como Safe Water Coalition, we've addressed this before. And it's not that we're advocating for higher rates, but we're advocating for targeted, smart, thoughtful, forward-thinking rates that make sense to consumers, but also generate the revenue needed to give us the product that we are here for, and knowing that there's no competition, there's no place else. This is where we get. So we as customers need to be protected. Anyway, but I wanted to make that part of the commentary because this that we've been passed out talks about the base charges, and again, and I just don't want anyone to not think that the base charges are not intended to potentially go up based on what that addendum to the cost of service study did show. Also, how that all does then tie into the bond that we voters supported. We were told an average of $271 per month would affect our residential bill. We were told 11% increase over the course of 4 years. If we change the rate structure and base charges go up, our usage goes up, where's that tie-in to that percentage that we were given and told that we voted for? Also, I do want to point out, when we look at this FAQ page, I have a lot of problems with number 4. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to be very critical about this. We cannot sit here and say our water system is limited by its ability to treat water during the summer, and then say that the water treatment plant can reach its capacity and expansion will be needed. This is due to the lack of maintenance and the lack of repair and the lack of foresight that has been done at that plant. That plant is not operating at capacity because it hasn't been maintained. So making consumers feel that the reason the demand is highest and so the water treatment plant can't reach its capacity and expansion is needed. Expansion, I'm sorry, has been code for let's ask you for more money for something we haven't given you yet. Water quality at that plant has not been improved. And we can't sit here and tell people that we are just limited by our ability to treat water because we're having higher usage. We can't meet capacity at the plant because the plant has not been maintained, and that needs to be truthful to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
I'm lucky I live on Old 63 South, and I don't understand any of this. But if you're trying to save water, I think other cities have water days. Like you can only water your lawn on Saturday and Tuesday or whatever. So I just make a suggestion that if you want to conserve water and cut the rates down, don't allow people to water just whenever they want to, just certain days.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Tom O'Connor, live at 806 Leawood Terrace, and I have a lot of minutia and notes to myself and that sort of thing about this, but I think I want to keep it kind of on topic, but more general, in that I want to thank you all and Water and Light and staff for bringing up this important discussion about kind of the philosophy of rate structure that I don't think we've had before, and seriously talking about putting the onus of the costs of expansions and more on those entities who drive the perceived need for those expansions and these bond issues and the multi-million-dollar expenditures. So I'm just generally in favor of a rate structure that rewards conservation and efficiency and harvests funds from those who choose to ignore conservation and efficiency. So I just was here to see what kind of support or opposition that you guys would get on in terms of that tug of war of politics, and I just wanted to offer my support for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
My name is Joe Gibbs. I live at 1115 Club Meadows Drive. There are two structures here. Is this for 5/8 inch meters?
The residential rate class, I believe, is mainly 5/8 inch meters.
They're
Yeah.
all for 5/8 inch, not.
I didn't prepare those sheets.
Yeah, those numbers there are 5/8 inch meters.
They're for 5/8 inch. Okay. The other thing too. Was this plan put together assuming that there wouldn't be any irrigating at night? In other words, we're going to design for, we're going to, irrigate between sunup and sundown.
Well, I mean, we don't really measure time of day when you use the water. So if you use the water in August, it's used in August, whether it's used at night or during the day.
Okay, so there's nothing given there on time of day or conservation or different rates then or anything? Okay,
No.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm Kathy Doisy. I live at 1404 Richardson Street. I'm here on behalf of the Community Garden Coalition Board of Directors. For those of you who aren't familiar with our organization, we're a small nonprofit, all-volunteer group that since 1983 has been helping a wide array of Colombians grow their own food. We work on a very small budget, and right now we're helping 20 different community gardens by giving them things like space, seeds, plants, mulch, compost, equipment like rototillers, hose, that sort of thing. And we're concerned that when this third tier goes into effect, that it's going to hurt us financially because we do have such a small budget. And we're worried that we're not going to be able to meet the needs of the gardeners that we currently are helping. When I first, years ago, started reading about this proposed third rate or third tier, they were talking about the need to moderate water usage by some of these big areas and homeowners that have these wide swaths of turf, where some of them openly say they put an inch of water on them a day in July to keep them looking like that. To us, it doesn't seem fair that community gardens should be penalized because of this usage by those consumers. And community gardens not only help people grow their own food, that reduces their carbon footprint. They've been shown to stabilize neighborhoods and also encourage friendships between some really disparate groups of people. So what we're asking and hoping is that possibly our irrigation hydrants might stay at the old two-tier system if that's at all possible to keep us in business. And while I have the podium here, I'd like to mention that Como Gives starts on December 1st, and that the Community Garden Coalition is a very worthy group to donate to. Any donation, large or small, will help, and it might help pay that third-tier water rates. So if we get stuck with them, so please.
Did I hear you mention you had 20 there are 20, you have 20 gardens?
Yeah, we pay the water only at some of those, but, you know, there's like, you got Christian Broadway that is helping I don't know how many dozens of families, and they have a lot of water usage. I worry that they might cut back if they're forced onto this third tier. And, you know, I like a nice lawn as much as anybody, but to me, growing food and promoting community is really a pretty good use of water. I'm a conservationist by heart, but that's where I kind of slip up.
The other, you say that the coalition pays for some of those 20.
Yeah.
The other water bills?
It's a hodgepodge. In some cases, it's churches. We've got a new community garden out at Friendship Baptist. They have no water. They've been hauling water with trucks and things like that. They're going to contact the city and try and get a water hydrant put in with the idea that we'll pick up the tab, which we would like to because, you know, it's a great new garden. But we're just concerned that, you know, we're on a very small budget. It's usually under $10,000 a year. And to help all these people in gardens, we're just concerned about the water usage and what this tier is going to do to us.
Well, and I'm just wondering, do you have you had mentioned an inch of water on lawns, but do you have any idea what the square footage or square?
No, I can't give you those calculations. I do know that, you know, one of our gardens over at Ash Street, which helps a very large population of people from other countries, used quite a bit of water in July during the drought, and we're going to be talking to them about conservation, but this third tier is going to affect us financially, I
Would
think.
it be possible to actually look at those numbers, you know, take some time next month? And
We
I'd
get
be happy
bills and
to
we can
try to work with you to see what those numbers actually are.
Yeah.
And,
Well, what could also help is if you all could come out and maybe help these people understand how to conserve, you know.
A very good point. Last question is, on average, out of the 20, do you know how many families, different families, would you say per garden? Just on
Dozens, hundreds. You know, it varies every year, and
Right.
I haven't seen last year's numbers yet.
But on a per garden basis, it's not hundreds?
Oh, per garden?
Uh-huh.
Well, I'm guessing, of course, but
Yeah.
I would bet that Broderick Christian is the largest, and I wouldn't be surprised if they have 30 or 40 different families at that garden. I think the Friendship Baptist Church, I got the impression they had about 20 or 30 families.
Okay.
The Ash Street must have 20 or 30. And then we have little tiny gardens around town where there's maybe 20 different groups gardening. But it is a worthwhile cause, and if you gave us
Absolutely.
donations at Como Gives, we could pay this third-tier
Como
water
Gives.
rate without going out of business. So my time's up. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Gary Kespool, 2215 South Country Club Drive. I came down tonight to talk to you about reclaiming water. Have you all ever done any study on reclaiming water for irrigation? It seems like a lot of these folks are talking about irrigation. And it's true, you treat all the water that we irrigate with, and it seems to me like if we could use reclaimed water like they do out west, that would save a lot of money in treating water. I know it would be expensive initially to get it all set up, and maybe you do it slowly, a subdivision at a time. The city should probably know how much water is used for irrigation. I know at my house, I have 2 meters, one for irrigation, one for the house. And I think that the irrigation meter is on a commercial rate. I'm pretty sure it is. But I want to keep it out of the house because I don't want to pay a discharge on the water I'm putting on the ground. So that's why I put the meter in for the irrigation. So I just want to ask you to do some thought about reclaiming water and starting to put a system in. And maybe we can do it by subdivision. It'll take years to do, but I think in the long run it'll pay for itself.
Just to be clear, reclaiming water, I've heard of gray water, but is that what you're talking about?
It runoff and out of it runs into lakes and ponds and retention
Capturing.
basins, and I guess there are rules about retaining water. You have to have water in them all the time, and you can't drain them down to nothing. I know I live on the Columbia Country Club, and they have a deep well there. They get free water. They pump the lake full every day and
Country
drain
Club?
it out at night.
The country club you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, I think there are probably enough wells around town that people aren't using, that maybe we could do something with those deep wells and not have to treat that water that we use for irrigation. It seems to me like there'd be an awful lot of water of CCF pumped every month in the summertime. And that's why the rates are higher in the summer, because everybody's irrigating.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Dan Hummelgarn. I live at 412 Tilley Avenue. And first, I'd just like to say thanks for having this forum and for looking at the rates and considering different structures. I have a couple questions. One is regarding the quarterly average plan. From the examples, it appears that the average consumer will be paying less with that plan. And if that's true, I wonder how that plan makes up for the lower flow of income or revenue.
I think that it's fairly right. I think if you're looking at that 5 CCF example that Tom was saying, that person would pay less in the first year. And I think that's because the person using 15 CCF is paying a fair bit more. Okay,
so those examples just aren't shown.
So I think there was a 5 and a 10 example in the document, but then if you went up and you redid the math at 15, you would see probably that they pay more.
Right.
So it kind of balances out.
Then my second question is regarding: is this a 1-year plan that we're talking about, or is it a 5-year plan? Because the charts appear to be a 5-year plan, but all the discussion has just been a 1-year plan.
So the structure that was proposed has a 5-year sort of projection, and that's partly because the bond issues debt service requirements is out over 4 years. So we kind of want to project and have some idea of what's going out forward. But in terms of what's going to change, it's going to be 1 year at a time. So those numbers are projections, but they may be different.
So a year from now, you'll be considering.
It would probably be the same structure, but it might be different values within that structure. I mean, after all, every year, we have to reconsider how people respond to rates and how people's usage changes and differs, and you don't want to be held down. So I think this is kind of a projection. It gives us an idea of how you look out forward, but it may not end up being exactly what those numbers are.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
The City Council only does rates for 1 year.
Oh, okay.
That's why it's a 1-year plan in that sense.
Right. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is May Parker, and I live at 4216 Derby Road. And I don't know a lot about this, but I do think that it is a good idea for people to conserve. And I think that it is a good idea for people to realize how much they are using. And rate increases could be a good way to do that. I do also like the idea of, maybe educating people as well, like maybe sending out a flyer or something to let people know, if you don't want your rates to be as high, here are certain ways you can conserve. And that, might give people a little bit of comfort and say, okay, well, my rates are based on what I use. And these are also tips on how I can reduce my costs. Because, some consumers, if you're just a single person with a child, you're definitely not going to use as much as if you're, you do have a huge yard, or if you're using a lot of water. And, just from experience, seeing people, some people just don't even realize how much they use. And so I do think that it is a good idea to, at least help people realize how much they use. And so that's basically what I wanted to say.
Okay. Thank you very much.
My name is Edna Green, and I live at 308 Hillsdale Road. This really isn't about the increase in the water usage, it's about the billing. So I figure this is probably the time to bring this up as long as there's everyone here. It may affect a lot of people who are in this forum. I'm on budget billing, and the actual charge was less than my budget billing. So I incurred a credit. 1 month I was given a bill for $22. Then when it came the time for April or March, it was $500. I thought it was absolutely ridiculous to then charge me $22. Why not use the credit I had to pay the money in April or March, rather than charge me $22 1 month and then wait 3 months later and charge me $500. It didn't make any sense. So my complaint is, if you have incurred credit with budget billing, leave it there to pay whatever the settle-up month is in April or March.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hi.
Donna Kessel. So is this a child tax? I mean, if you have like 5 kids, so there's 7 people in the household, your water's going to be more. I mean, there's no, as opposed to having 1 child or, I mean, I really want to, so, right, it's going to be, I'm reading it right?
There's 2 different rate structures.
What's
And
that?
I said there's 2 different rate structures. One of those is, I think, maybe designed even to kind of address that particular issue. So what was referred to, I believe, as the individual block structure. I think the intent of that is that if it's sort of more individualized, rather than, so that if you did have, say, 5 children and you used a lot of water year round, you would not be as penalized as you might be on a fixed block schedule. So I think that's one of the reasons why we were looking at 2 different versions.
Higher.
Right, because your winter average would be higher. So then, if you're using the same all year round,
For the one kind of charging.
in one of those
right.
rate structures, yeah.
Yeah. I know when sometimes I have my nieces living with me and it goes up, so.
Yeah.
But it should, but I don't think it should go incrementally up, so, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alice Turner. Do I say my address? I forgot that. I support conservation. Worked in environmental areas most of my life, and I'm sorry I missed the presentation earlier. I imagine a number of cities around the country are going to this, but cities like Las Vegas use a lot of, I think it's called gray water, at a lot of their public fountains, at a lot of those fancy casinos. And so what are the areas where we can do more work on those kinds of things? I don't know. I'd love to see people that wash their car in the middle of the summer using gray water, but I don't know how to implement that. But what I primarily wanted to talk about was educational campaigns. Summer after summer, when we have a drought here, I'm going, I want to conserve energy, sure, but this is not when you should be pushing home performance. You should be pushing water conservation. And I've waited, and I've heard recently you were finally looking into a program maybe called Water Sense from the federal government. I would like to see full-time employees hired, as we've worked on energy very successfully in this town, teaching that at all different levels. In our bills, if people still get paper bills, in those newsletters, at the elementary schools. That's a lifetime of teaching conservation on water. And it's one area we've missed, even though we've been so good at energy. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. aren't always scary. Okay. I think we can leave the window open for a little bit longer if anybody else is if is interested. Sure, go ahead and add one more.
I didn't use my other 5, all of it. Where can we get the formula or the spreadsheet to figure one of these out for ourselves? You have different size meters.
Oh, for different size meters?
You have different size meters and different rates, and you're going to use a different average the first 4 months. And is this on a spreadsheet somewhere, or the formulas where somebody like me can figure this out? Just out of curiosity.
Answer that, Scott?
Yes,
You're looking
please.
at me. If you have a commercial or large commercial meter, the rates that you'll be charged are in the presentation, which is on the website, so you could just replace them in the spreadsheet, because the spreadsheet that the city has provided is for residential, and the commercial rates are slightly different, but they're in that presentation that's available on the city's website, the proposed 2019 rates.
What about the 1-inch meter?
The base charge is in the presentation as well. You can find the base charge there, but the base charge is not changing for 2019. Whatever it is now is the same as what it'll be for 2019 on your bill.
What I want to know is where are the formulas?
Well, you can use the same spreadsheet for residential, for commercial. You just need to change the rates to be the correct rates.
So I think
they're in the presentation.
And where is it located?
I'm hoping staff could tell them how to get to that site.
On the city website or what?
Yes, it's on the city website. I can show you after we're done.
Okay, thank you.
Keep a couple more feet.
Just a few more feet.
My dog fell asleep. So.
I think we all wish we were your dog now.
Yeah, so anyway. My concern is for homeowners, because when we had a drought several years ago, my home that I was living in was a 2-story walkout, and we couldn't water the foundation because of the design of the house. You couldn't get to the foundation. It cracked. And our house that was valued at $163,000 when we bought it is now worth $105,000 because the foundation is cracked. Everything is shifted. I had to have all the doors rehung and sanded, or I couldn't get them to close. There's some sidings at the upper level, so the front door doesn't work. So I now owe more on the house than I could get for market value. I'm currently not living in it because it needs a lot of extensive repairs. There's drywall cracked, there's a cracked beam in the second floor that's causing sag. There's a lot of stuff that happens when you have a rough summer. And we are on clay, and it doesn't like drought. It does nasty things like kill off our trees, and it can cause a lot of damage to individual homes. And the rental homes are likely to be older homes and are likely to not have the expensive new appliances and water systems because they were built longer ago, and that's where our poor people live. So I'm a little concerned about not thinking through the best way to improve our system before we need it, and to make sure that we have sufficient potable water as the time goes on, because I've got a feeling that climate change is real. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Deanna Quietwater Noriega, and I live at 1536 Bodie Drive currently, and it's a mixed neighborhood with a lot of low-income housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Quick question. I'm Melinda Hemmelgar, and I live at 412 Tilley Avenue. So are commercial rates the same as what individual homeowners pay? I'm assuming they might be the same, but I'm curious about that. Also, are there penalties for individuals who water their lawn and the water goes out into the street and sidewalk? You know, is there a way to report individuals who are abusing water use?
So I think regarding the commercial, I believe that the part of the purpose is to sort of align commercial and residential so that they are more similar.
Are they now?
They're not that similar currently.
How are they not similar?
So I know that the commercial, and I'm looking for people to correct me here, but I know that the commercial currently uses the 70-170 rate structure. So it goes to 70% of their average winter consumption, which is what we described as that individualized block. That's what they currently use, while as residentials currently use a fixed block structure. So it's like 2 CCF cutoff, I think, is the tier 1, tier 2.
I'm
so
confused. So are commercial places have a lower rate?
They have a different rate. They tend to use a lot more water, and I'm not sure if it's lower or not. I don't have numbers, but it's different for sure.
I guess my thinking is that you should pay for what you use, right? Everybody the same.
I think Tom could address this, but the base on commercial compared to the base usage, that first tier, is a little bit less than residential base. But Tom,
Commercial and large commercial have lower rates. That's the existing rate structure as it stands now.
Why is that?
Well, typically it's because commercial and large commercial have lower peaking factors than residential customers. But if we move to these block rates, that eliminates the need to have that difference in rate because we address differences in usage through the rate structure instead of having to have different rates. And so the plan is actually to align their rates over the next several years so that residential and commercial rates would be the same if we move to one of these block rate structures, because basically we address peaking through the rate structure through the block rates instead of addressing it through the rates only. But having lower rates for commercial and large commercial is not uncommon because on average, basically residential has higher peak in the summer. Your average residential customer, and again, this isn't all customers, but on average, when you look at them as a class, they peak more in the summer than commercial, and then commercial peaks more than large commercial. And so that's the typical justification. We did not develop the current rate structure, just to be clear. I'm just telling you what it currently is in the typical justification why they're like that.
Now, when you refer to peaking here, you refer to the highest summer.
Basically, it's your maximum day versus your average day. Because if you have a commercial customer that uses the same amount of water year around, that's a great customer because they're buying water from us every day of the year in the same amount, as opposed to a typical residential customer which buys maybe 3,000 gallons a month in the winter, but come summertime they're buying 15,000 gallons a month, which means we have to build capacity to provide them 15,000 gallons a day for the month, but they're only using it a few months out of the year. Whereas a commercial customer, we may build them only say they're using 10,000 gallons a month, but they use it every month. We only have 10,000 gallons capacity for them, and they pay for it every single month. And that's why the rate is lower from a cost of service perspective.
And then penalties for individuals who abuse water? By watering their sidewalks and the water's running down the street, they're trying to have a green lawn.
I think
not at this time.
Right. I think the current
I would
rate
like to
structure
see
doesn't.
that. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. No one wants to look me in the eye anymore.
My name's Laura Wacker. I live at 1617 Paris. That was a great question that I've been trying to find the answer to for a long time is, do I pay more or less than a commercial customer for water? It's all the same water. It all had to be treated. I don't want to pay more than a commercial customer for my water, especially when I see banks watering lawns in the rain and just wasting water all the time. I certainly don't want my water to be more expensive than that water. So that's just a point I'd like to make.
Okay, thank you very much.
Scott, can I just provide a point of clarification on that point? Is that most commercial customers, like a bank who's watering their grass, has what's called an irrigation meter, so they would not be paying less on that irrigation water. That rate is, when I was talking about commercial, I was talking about commercial usage of what they use indoors. Irrigation is different. And when I say, because actually somebody asked me this during a break after my initial presentation. When I say irrigation, what I'm talking about are irrigation-only meters. And basically the reason people have irrigation-only meters is because then they don't have to pay sewage on it, because we know that that water is being used outdoors. So these large commercial customers you see who have lots of watering, they have 2 meters. Even if they have 2 meters, they have a meter for their indoor usage, and then they have what's called an irrigation meter. In that irrigation meter, they don't pay sewer on it, but they pay the Tier 2 rate. Currently, right now, they pay the Tier 2 rate during the summer period on all usage, period. There's no 70%, there's nothing. They pay Tier 2 on everything that goes through that meter. And the same goes for residential. Some residential customers have irrigation meters. It's less common for residential because of the way we bill sewers based on average winter consumption as well, and so they don't pay sewer on it when you're a resident. Hopefully that doesn't provide more confusion than clarity it provided, but I think that's an important point. Just when you talk about that bank, that irrigation water that they're using, it is not less than your water because they're paying the irrigation rate on that water, and it's a higher. It's the highest rate basically right now.
Thank you, Tom.
And it will be the highest rate if we make a change.
And it'll
also.
still be the highest rate if we
In
make
both
a change.
proposed rate structures, yeah. Okay. It being 7:30 and no one willing to read my eyes anymore, I'll entertain anybody who would like to make any last comments, I'll give the chance. Otherwise, invite people to continue to think about this.
Sorry I brought up irrigation. But it seems to me that if we had reclaimed water system, it would make less capacity on our purified water system, which should help cut down the cost of additional infrastructure at the water plant. And I bet if you analyze it, it turns out to be a wash. Buying new equipment for the water system. And I thought there was a city ordinance that all irrigation systems had to be on a separate meter. Now, I know some residences were grandfathered, but do those grandfather clauses never sunshine? Do they never stop? Do they go forever? I think there are a lot of meters out there, that a lot of homes that are using irrigation through their regular meter. And they're paying sewage charge. I understand that. But because of that, we don't know how much water is used for irrigation. And I mean, it's a guess. We have a lot of them. The new construction all put in separate meters, and the commercial puts in separate meters. But there's a lot of residences, before the ordinance was enacted, they were put on the regular meter. And maybe we need to get those switched over to an irrigation meter so we know.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Sure.
Comment from that individual. So do we basically bill for our commercial, the more you use, the less you pay, which has long been a concern of consumers versus large users? Is that basically how we bill?
I do not believe that that's the case. I believe there is a tier 2 and it is a higher rate. I believe. I'm looking for correction.
That's correct. The more you can, if anything, the more you use, you'll pay more for additional water.
The more you use, less you pay in terms of the rate, not, your final bill.
Well,
no, the more you pay, the more water you use, like once you exceed and go into the next tier is a higher rate. So you start paying more the more water you use.
Right, when you move into tier 2.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, I will open it up a little bit for some board discussion, so you can, listen to us talk. I also invite you, if you haven't had a chance yet to speak to customer service reps about your bill, I invite you to take that opportunity now as well. And I will open it up for comments from the board at this point. Relatively brief comments from the board, I suppose.
I'm going to just jump right in and say that there were several people that talked about conservation and the importance of conservation. And I don't think that in at least the literature I've seen tonight that we've mentioned the fact that the utility is considering and has made a commitment to improve their water conservation programs. And I think it's something that the board is going to need to make sure that these conservation programs get funded, that they actually get up and running, and that they have some real purpose and direction in terms of reducing the summer water usage. So I think that's one crucial thing. And I did want to just clear up this idea of the commercial paying less versus the residential. And I think Tom did a good job. But in the wintertime, there is no second tier. There's only one tier. Residential customers pay $2.79 per CCF. A regular commercial customer pays $2.79. So it's, $2.63. So it's $2.79, $2.60. Doesn't matter how much they use. Those rates apply all for every CCF. In the summertime, once you get to the past the first tier, which would be in the second tier, then everybody pays the same. All the commercial customers will pay $3.91. And that's going to be then, the suggestion is to move to a third tier, which says, okay, you have that usage that you had during the winter, then you have what I think is called responsible outdoor usage, which is a margin. It's either a fixed block going up to 8 CCF or up to 170% of your winter average. And then that third tier will then be charged at $7.82. And so that's where the cost or the revenue will be brought in to pay for the bond issue. The second thing that I want to mention is that these projections that were made on into future years will, once we get past 2019, we will still have to increase rates in order to pay for the bond that we just passed last summer. So the increases that are projected for the bond revenue needs will be applied to all of those rates once we get past 2019. So it'll apply to the low end, I think to the base rate, and the two tiers above it. So once we get a rate established with a third tier, new rate increases will apply to all those tiers, if that makes sense. And so it's this first year to establish a sort of a rate structure that will then, will still need future increased revenue needs to pay for the bond.
I would supplement that with, there's also this phenomenon known as inflation, and it hits all of our expenses, so that we also have to raise rates on a regular basis to cover inflation. One of the reasons that the advisory board was in favor of the third tier was because as we were looking at the current bond that was just approved by the voters, it was apparent that the projections for water use would require expanding the size of the water treatment plant in the future. We wished to see that expansion pushed off as far into the future as possible by summer water use conservation. The technique that we've used for electricity has been what is known as a progressive rate structure, where the more you use, the more you pay. There are more than one rate. There has, of course, been historically in utilities the assumption that people who use a lot should get a lower rate for the higher use. Columbia has not done that for 30 or 40 years. We thought that this was a good time to apply that rate to the major factor that seemed to be driving the size of the water treatment plant that we need. The amount of water used varies from year to year, based pretty much on whether it rains frequently in the summer or whether there are long dry spells. As Jim Windsor pointed out, that means that we put more of our income revenue at risk, which is to say the total income will vary from year to year based upon the weather. We certainly need to plan for that. On the other hand, we build for the worst year. We decide how much electricity we need to produce based on the hottest month, not the average month, because we need to be able to produce the electricity we need every hour of the year. Water, we've got a little more flexibility. We don't fill those towers based on the hourly use. We try to keep them filled once a day. That's partly because water runs out slowly and electricity runs out instantly when we put it into the lines. So part of the advisory board's concern was that we have several years of data on how much change there would be when we give the normal signal that we want people to use less, which is raising the rate. Now, we're definitely in thorough agreement that we also need to do conservation training. But this is part of the conservation training. It's going to cost more.
Okay, I think I'm also going to abstain from commenting tonight. So, okay, with that, I will suggest that we, do you have any last comments?
What I was hoping is that either you, Scott, or staff could kind of explain once more the schedule on how this will actually, to the next couple of months before the development of this rate, before the council actually decides on the vote, with a vote.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do that, and then if I get it wrong, you can correct me, Tad. But so the idea from here is we're going to spend the next couple of weeks collecting more public comments. So if you have further comments, you think of things, we invite you to take that survey in the back and let us know what you think as well. And let us know what you think over the next couple weeks. I think it's 2 weeks, and around Thanksgiving or so, we will stop having public comment, and we will collect it all together. The Water and Light Board, the staff will make a recommendation for a rate structure change that's going to go forward. The board will look at it about the first week of December. We'll have several talks, and then we will be tentatively inviting City Council to have a public hearing on this starting in December, with a public hearing hopefully scheduled for January as well. So there will be many more opportunities for the public conversation here. Hopefully that makes some sense.
And I do want to emphasize that the Water and Light Board meeting will be talking about this in its December meeting, which is the first Wednesday, and I believe that's December 5th.
Yes.
And the public is always welcome to attend all of our meetings.
Yeah, it's exciting. We get to yell at each other. It's fun. You guys miss out. Okay. With that, I believe that we will be adjourned. I don't know if we have a formal motion, but I think we'll be.
Thank everybody for their comments.
Yes. Thank everybody. Thank you all once again for coming, and please let us know what you think.